Welcome to HBRV Lifestyle, the podcast. I am the host, the Honey Badger, giving it to you straight in the RV business. As always, if this is the first time you've heard this podcast, I go over a lot of topics dealing with camping, the RV business, how to buy an RV. And this comes from 13 years of being in the RV business itself. Very interesting, some of the topics that people want me to discuss that are on the dealership side. It's very interesting to hear the different, how do I put it? Like the different mixed bag of opinions about what's going on. Here's what I do know. I do know that you, the consumer, really control this market. You control most of the spending, period. Whether it's Bud Light, which everybody seems to be protesting, whether it's a cup of tea, a cup of coffee at your local Starbucks, maybe it's a brand new car, maybe it's a brand new travel trailer or truck camper. Reality is the consumer controls everything that has to do with the market. And I believe what's kind of happened, because I've heard a lot of complaints from customers. You know, even though I haven't done a podcast episode in about a month, and even though I haven't really paid attention to the YouTube channel too much, doesn't mean that I don't get emails or comments on all the social media platforms or direct messages that, how do I put this politically correct? Basically, they feel like they're not taken care of. It seems like consumers of all kind, including business owners, feel like they're not being taken care of. And a lot of that stems from COVID-19. COVID-19 ruined a lot of companies, ruined a lot of workers. It ruined a lot of things that can come back and probably will come back, but it'll take time. Let's be honest with ourselves. During the Great Recession, so President Obama gets elected, does all the right things to get us out of the recession. It took us 3.5 years to get out of the recession. It took us less than a year to get into it. Now, I know there's other things that are involved, but let's be real. In 2007, outside of a handful of people, maybe 3 or 4 people, everything was good. Then within a year, boom, OA happens. And now obviously there's more to it than that, but it's just an example of how quickly things can turn, especially if you don't have the foresight for the future. So I had this great conversation with a good friend of mine on my way home from California. I'm driving along. We talked for like an hour and 15 minutes. And he said, you know, there was big price cuts in 2009. And I go, really? And he goes, yeah. I go, oh, okay. You know, that's why there's not as much inventory out there right now, because they're all waiting for that big price cut. So what I did was I pulled over and I started having lunch. And if you know me personally, and you've known me more than 5 years, you know I keep records on things. I keep notes. I keep detailed notes about trends and pricing and everything else. So I reminded him. I sent him a clip of all the pricing from 2007 to 2011 from the factory, not from the dealership, from the factory. And the manufacturers that are still in business today, pricing did nothing but go up. since I got in this business. So unofficially, I got in this business at the tail end of 2008, officially at the beginning of 2009. At the end of 2008, I worked a show where we were selling a Keystone Springdale. It was a 25 RLS. It was the most stripped down thing you could possibly get. I mean, it didn't even have a furnace. It was a 25-foot trailer with a slide out, no furnace, no outside shower, no black tank flush. It didn't even have pass-through storage, guys. It didn't even have an outside storage door. It was a dinette in the back, a couch in the slide, and a walk-around queen bed up front with a small kitchen with a couple cabinets and a little bit of counter space. We were selling that unit at the end of 2008 for $89.95. It was a leader coach. It was one of those that dealers bought to get people in the door, and they go, oh my God, there's nothing to this. Did we sell our fair share of them? Of course. In 2010, that same trailer went up $3,000. I'm going to repeat that again. $3,000. And it's been steadily increasing ever since. When a manufacturer has a price decrease, it generally is because an appliance went down, shipping went down. Overall, there is no 50% price cut because there's a recession. The only time anything gets price cut like that is when you have vendors that cut their prices. So the guys that are the wholesale end are making all the money. The guys that sell the refrigerators, the guys that sell the wood, the guys that sell the glue, the guys that sell the tires, those guys are making tons of money still. They will never go out of business. And they will continue to charge what they charge to the manufacturers of everything. Cars, trailers, boats. So there is a fallacy out there that prices are going to get cut dramatically on the manufacturing side. It's not. Shipping might go down. So you might see, in some cases, stuff that's built in Indiana or built in Boston, Massachusetts, shipped out to Texas, as an example. You may see a decrease in price, but that'll come from how much it costs to ship it. But the dramatics are not going to occur. I hate to break it to you guys, but they're just not going to. Now, here is what has changed. Dealership profit margin. That's changed. Now, there are some dealers out there. God bless you guys for trying to make the same profit you were making during COVID. Totally get it. If I were a business owner, I would try and make as much money as I could too. But there are dealers out there that do understand that this is a buyer's market. And they'd rather, okay, so I'm going to take a pay cut this year and possibly in 2024, but I want to increase my market share. And that's what's occurring. Several of my dealer friends are on both sides. I have one of my dealer friends that says there's no way he's going to cut his margins down. It's not his fault that prices have gone up. Why should he suffer? I get it. 200% get it. People have high overheads, got to pay people. The only way you can pay people is if you make money. Totally understand. And then I have dealer friends of mine on the opposite end of the spectrum where they're like, man, let's just sell as many trailers, as many fifth wheels, as many motorhomes as we can every single month. We're not going to lose a deal. And let's see what happens. And that's the attitude I would have if I was going to go back into the dealership, which is a possibility, folks. More on that later. But if I were on the dealership side, I would stop worrying about what the gross profit of a deal is and start worrying about how many trailers did I sell this month? How many used trailers did I buy? How many consignments do I have? How do I move inventory quicker? How do I get the consumer to be attracted to a price point with interest rates being high? Now, you, the consumer, need to understand something. A lot of you are under this impression that interest rates are high. Interest rates are not high. Now, a lot of you are going to turn off the podcast and, oh, God, that guy's full of crap. Okay, that's your prerogative. But if you want to be educated and get all the information humanly possible, you're going to listen to this next segment. Interest rates are not high. Interest rates were high in the 1970s, the 1980s, part of the 1990s, and during the Great Recession. And here, let me explain. So in 2009, okay, when I was working at shows, I always asked the trend, and I always asked because I was waiting for rates to come down. But I always ask, what do I quote customers when they're an 800 FICO? So 800, putting a lot of money down. What do I quote them? John, you quote them 12 years, 16.95%. And my first thought in my head is, nobody's going to buy it 16.95. Boy, was I wrong. Because people were used to paying higher interest rates than they are now. So we had a 10-year run where it was just, if you weren't selling RVs, it was because you're a knucklehead. If you were a dealership that was going out of business or on the verge of going out of business from 2012 to 2022, you're a bad business person. Something went wrong where you're not doing the right things because interest rates were stupid low. Even in 2015, 2016, when rates were in the 6 and 7% range, people were still out buying. So interest rates have nothing to do with the RV purchase. It's just an excuse. And folks, if you're listening to this and you're a consumer and you're worried about the interest rate, realistically, you should have bought 3 or 4 years ago when the rates were artificially low. This is what normal should be. The normal that I was brought into for the first 3 years of this business was double-digit interest rates. So when I hear dealership friends of mine, finance managers, and, oh, rates are at like 10 and 11% for an 800 score. That's what I was working with back in 2009, 10, and 11, folks. If anybody got like a 799 back then, it was a stroke of luck. Most of the time, and I looked at this, I kept a record of my average deals every month. I did it because I wanted to get better. The average interest rate that I sold a customer back in 2010, the full year I was in this business, was 14%. And I sold a lot of great credit customers. 14%. Average term was 10 years. Now, what's interesting about that is that and I've said this a million times in the last year, when interest rates are high, profits at the dealership are low. I'm going to repeat that again. When interest rates are higher, dealer profits are lower. When the interest rates come down, if they come down next year, the year after that, dealer profits are going to go up. So it was very interesting that people that came back to buy from me, that bought in end of 2009 through middle of 2011, you want the interesting part of the whole situation was? They weren't buried in their trades. Now, some of them were, because they bought a unit that the factory went out of business, so obviously the book value is terrible. But in all reality, if you bought a unit that's still being built today, or the manufacturer's still in business today, a Forest River product, a Coachman product, back then, you were pretty darn close to even. And that's because dealerships' profit margins were way low. I mean, we're talking about, I was shocked at how many businesses didn't go belly up because there was no money being made. But they made it up on volume. They made it up on parts. They made it up on service. These are guys that knew how to make money in several different ways. They just wanted the customer. If they could get the customer, they could keep the cash flow going through the dealership. Without the customer, there is no dealership. Period. So folks, when you're sitting here complaining to somebody about 899 or 9.5, and you are older than 50 years old, or you're older than 40, go sit down, and if you can find it, go look at your mortgage rate in the early 2000s. Go look at your first RV. If you're a boomer, if you're a baby boomer, go look at your first RV payment stub, whether you bought a boat, whether you bought a sand car, doesn't matter. Go look at it, and go look at what the interest rate was back then. You're going to go, wow. For you millennials, Generation Z, folks, this is normal. Not what you want to hear, but this is normal. Nobody taught you economics 101. It was, the interest rates were artificially low for years. It's why the average savings account was almost nothing. People were like, I'm getting 0.9% on an interest rate on a savings account. Get the heck out of here. They go invested in something. It's why the stock market's as high as it is. If the stock, let's just use logic for a minute. If I told you today, for the last 10 years, you were going to get 5% in a savings account, would you risk your money in the stock market, or would you take the 5% a year? Majority of you are going to go, I'm going to take the 5%. It's FDIC insured. So because interest rates are so low, many people got into the stock market because there was no balance left. Why would I put it and lock up my money for 3 years for 1% or less than 1% on a CD? So interest rates were artificially low. When I got my first ever savings account, I was getting 4.75% AYP, annual yield per year. My first car, it was a 2000, the first car I ever bought. It was a 1999 Toyota Tacoma. It was the first one I ever bought on credit. It was a used one. It's 3 years old. I had good credit, good score. My interest rate was 7%. That was at my own credit union. When I bought my first house, The interest rate was over 6%. It was a fixed rate. I had good credit. I put good money down. Everything was perfect and lined up. My grandparents' first interest rate on their home in Orange County was 19% on a mortgage. 19%, folks. My grandfather's first motorhome purchase was a Road Trek motorhome. These people are 800 credit. They got quoted 8.5% from the dealership and 8.99. This is back in 1999, folks. 8.99 through their own credit unions. And my grandmother had 4 different banks look at it. And they took the dealership at 8.5. So folks, stop worrying about the interest rate. The interest rate, the only thing it affects is what you can buy, which is a good thing. Most people don't understand how good of a thing it really is. Okay? When interest rates, so this is how silly things got. So I worked for Giant RV for years. And I sold a lot of Landmark Bighorn fifth wheels. I sold a lot of Cyclone toy haulers. I sold a lot of big ticket items that were huge money. Now back then, 70,000, 75 grand was huge money for a fifth wheel. Even for a fifth wheel toy hauler. So let me give you a skinny on that. When I would sell a $75,000 unit of any kind in 2010 or 11, the people generally had to make $100,000 a year to qualify for that loan. And that's because interest rates were high. So it balanced, like, okay, so you're going to buy something at 75 grand, you make 25% more than that before taxes to have that loan. People that were making 40 grand a year, 45 grand a year, were not buying $75,000 loans. Because when you were at 10, 11, 12, 13%, it put the payment way out of whack with what your income is. So it's forcing you, the consumer, to buy down to what you really can afford. For some of you that make 50 grand a year, it means you're going to look for something that's a $300, $350 payment, which means we're back to buying something between 25 and 30 grand. That's what it was when I first got into this business. It's all a cycle. And then you work your way up. You start putting a little more money away. You start going, man, that $350 payment's easy. And you know what? We just saved up $5,000 and we got this trailer. Now I think we're ready for the fifth wheel because now we know we can pay down the loan. And the bank knows you can pay down the loan. But when rates were at 2.99 and you could get a $400 payment on a $100,000 fifth wheel, it didn't make any sense. Because let's be real, RVs are toys. So yeah, there's a lot of people in the used market. There's a lot of people going, okay, you know what? Maybe 45 grand is too much money. That's perfect. That's beautiful. You're not the $500 a month person. You're the $300 a month person, the $250 a month person. So if you don't want to buy a small little trailer that's brand new for under $200 and you'd rather go for something that's a little older but a little bigger, there's stuff out there. And prices have gone down. The prices have gone down to reasonability. And by the way, side note, if you have a trade or you have something you're trying to sell and it's been on the market for more than 6 months, you have it priced too high. But I owe too much more than that. Well, write a check. Get out of it. I can't afford to write a check. Okay, give it back to the bank. That's how simple this business really is. That's how simple this lifestyle really is. Right now, if you're watching this on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, I'm doing this in my bedroom of my fifth wheel. We live full time in our fifth wheel. It gives us a lot of freedom. My job gives me a lot of freedom. And I was asked the other day, I got a great question from somebody saying, well, would you ever go back to the dealership lot? Yeah, if I absolutely had to, I'd go back and work for a dealership. Hands down. No problem. And there may be a time, maybe sooner than later, the way things are going, that I might have to do that. You know, the good news is, and this is the other thing that most folks don't realize, you don't know if you like something until you give it a chance. A lot of people say, well, I'd rather rent first before I buy. That's a great idea. You know how many rental companies there are? Shout out to my boy at Coyote RV Sales and Rentals. Shout out to my brother at JS RV Sales in San Diego, in Santee. They're rental companies. There's good rental companies out there that you go, wow, you know what? I'm only going to do this once a year. God, $1,000 for a weekend, $1,200 for a weekend. That's half the money of owning one plus insurance. But if I'm going to go 4 and 5 times a year, God, I should look into buying one. The point is not to get you guys all riled up or pissed off or upset. The point is to give you the right information, because there's just too much bad information out there. There's too much information that is clickbait information. There's too many people desperate to make money on YouTube and TikTok and stuff like that, that their agenda is not necessarily the correct information. I've used a lot of people like Josh the RV Nerd as a prime example of somebody that is good to listen to. But there are others out there that just, it's like, really? I mean, did they really just say that? Nutty. Absolutely nutty.